Welcome to hashtag 52 boundaries. And we are talking about emotions this week. And I am so delighted to have with me my friend Lisa Jayne, who is a relationship elevation specialist. And she and I are all about emotions. And so this is going to be the most fruitful conversation I think we could possibly have about such an important topic. Welcome, Lisa. It's wonderful to see you.
Thanks, Angela. It's so good to be here. It's been such a while since we've had these sorts of conversations. So it's really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and especially these days, we've talked about that emotions are so important because the world is such a, well, it's always been an unpredictable place. But right now, with all the changes that are happening so quickly, our emotions are more and more taxed, and we are more stressed than ever.
Yeah,
Wow.
absolutely. I totally agree. I personally think this is the only currency that we need to focus on right now is emotional mastery, because if you know what to do with your emotions,
Yeah.
it's like you can move through anything. And there is a lot of pressure on people right now.
Yeah. We talked about, before we started recording, we talked about how we spend our weekends, or this weekend in particular, because it was just interesting to hear you say, I wasn't feeling like myself, but then I moved through it. I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I had. I woke up, we talked about sleeping. I woke up at 2:30, couldn't go back to sleep, and then going, okay, I could now mope the whole day and go, I'm really, really tired. And instead, you and I both went for a walk.
Yeah. Yep, you've just got to do that. You lean into it, and we are not taught that. We're never taught to lean into our emotions. We do everything we possibly can to get rid of them.
Yeah.
But really developing the skill, I'm going to lean into this and try not to make a judgment or assessment or put any meaning to it. I'm just going to lean into it and allow it to just be and see what happens.
So when people have rigid boundaries, they generally dismiss the so-called negative emotions. And I don't use the word negative. I think they're either pleasant or unpleasant. They're elevating or limiting. So it's I don't want to feel frustrated. I don't want to feel sad. I don't want to feel angry. And that's actually the stuff that perpetuates it, right?
Marcus Aurelius said, what's in the way is the way. And I really believe with emotions, that's it. If I can lean into anger and actually show up for myself and be with myself while I'm feeling angry, I get to go deeper and deeper. And what happens then is I can release it, I can move through it, I can grow from it. If I'm not owning it, if I'm not even feeling it, my feelings are over there somewhere. And that means that I don't feel connected to myself because there's a part of me that's missing.
Yeah, I mean, the Latin original meaning of the word emotion is the verb is emovere, and that means to move out.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
emotion
wow.
is really designed for us to move stuff out.
Yes.
And when we don't do that, when we sit on it, it has it clogs us up literally.
Yeah, that's right. I totally agree. And it stops you feeling connected, like connected to yourself. And like I've worked with people that just go, I just can't even remember who I am, and there's so many years of all that emotion held back and held in. And it's like, it's no wonder that you've become someone that you're really not, because you're not really being yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so we've got the rigid boundaries where people hold everything in and they're not processing it. And we know now from epigenetics and science in general that any kind of emotion that we're not really processing can actually lead to disease, which is also an interesting word, disease, right?
Yeah.
Whereas when we do the opposite, when we've got really soft boundaries, that's when we dramatize everything, and that can have exactly the same effect.
Yes, yeah. That's very interesting, actually. I've often thought about that, because this is, well, for me, the conversation is about, are we in our head or are we in our heart? And I think the activation of the heart is actually a thing that you can feel. And there's a lot of, lip service towards, I be in your heart, be in your heart. But what does it actually mean? And sometimes when I talk to people, they'll say, yeah, I'm so emotional. I tell everybody what I think, and I'll go, yeah, but that's still actually not in your heart, because when your heart is activated, you really know yourself well. You're very courageous. You don't have to be in those, what you say, soft boundaries. Like, you've got very healthy emotional features, pillars, that you can live your life on. So it is interesting what you just said then, because that's not our usual perception,
Well, a lot of the times it's perfectly okay to and I use the word deliberately, inflict our emotions on somebody else, because we also have the opposite. We also use the wording, you make me feel, right? And that's the one I have a really, really strong antibody response to, because nobody can really make us feel anything. But what we can do is we can take somebody's emotions on. Yes. And I think one of the reasons why we don't want to hear how somebody else is feeling, why we get into those rigid boundaries, is when somebody with soft boundaries comes in and goes, well, let me tell you how I feel, and then expects us to handle that. Because I'm responsible. You made me angry. So therefore, I should take care of that. When in fact, it's my responsibility to manage myself.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it, that taking on other people's feelings. I had if it's okay, I'd love to share a story from a client, anonymously. But I think it's a really good example of this, where she had a family situation, loved her family, was new to the family, loved them, really got along well with the mother-in-law. And one day she turned up all loving and just so loving this family situation that she'd married into. But the sister, who was very jealous and was having a really bad time at that time of her life, all of a sudden just decided that she just couldn't handle my client in her life. And when my client had finished loving up the mother-in-law and looked up, she saw the sister's look, and the look was one of like absolute hostility, jealousy. How dare you do that? You don't belong here. And my client took that on. She thought, oh, I'm doing the wrong thing. I shouldn't have done that. And I'm like, isn't that fascinating? I said, why did you think it was you? Why did you think it had anything to do with you? And she said, well, I don't know. And I said, isn't that, it just is so interesting, how we, and I've done this too, it's almost like that inner child, vulnerable part of me can make an assessment that this is my fault, and it's the development of, what you call flexible boundaries, I guess. You're sitting there in this state where you can actually go, well, actually, this has got nothing to do with me. There's nothing wrong with what I just did. So
we learn this as children. I mean, I know that my mother probably didn't mean it like this, but look what you made me do now. I am so upset. So now I have to do this. And so I was responsible for her reaction that could have been very different if she had chosen to take a different path, right? But it's so much easier to outsource responsibility. And it's kind of difficult, I think, because we now also know that emotions are contagious. Right? We do spread them. And I call that, you can either spread sunshine or you can spread fog. But somebody can really influence an environment considerably with their emotions that they have.
Yes.
And people don't have the boundaries in place to go, well, that's actually you, not me. And say, and have the empathy to say, yeah, I'm really sorry, that's how you feel. Not from a place of, I'm really sorry, it's how you feel, but the sense of, oh, that must be really hard. Then it can poison a whole family, as you said, with your client. It can poison a whole organization.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a quick story about.
I love stories.
A client who it was an organizational client, and we were running some trainings, and I was asking, so is the receptionist going to join us, because it was emotional intelligence? And they said, why would she want to be here? So because she is actually the linchpin. People come in the morning and they look to her, and she is very volatile in her emotions. There could be days where she's calm, cool, and collected, but there could be days where she's absolutely abrasive to everybody. And then there are days where she's just, you say hi to her and she bursts into tears. And it's completely random. And so people will take that on, because she also gets them involved in lengthy conversations about her emotional state and expects them to fix it. They are responsible for it. So by the time they get into the office, they have already changed their state so much that it impacts on their proficiency and their productivity. So, teaching a person who's really important how to manage their emotions can change a whole culture.
Absolutely. I think that is so, that's really when you nail down to everything, come right back in. It's like, how do we share our emotions in a way that is, I'm sovereign over my emotions and I'm owning my emotions, but it's really healthy for me to share. And for me, it's always about motive. So if I question my motive, where I'm coming from. Like, am I sharing because I want this to be fixed, or do I want to feel some relief, or do I want to be rescued? And getting really honest about that, rather than just like blah. Because if you can create, and I call them emotionally safe spaces, really, like emotional safety is something that we're not taught when we're younger. And sometimes, we don't even realize, a lot of clients I've worked with, they don't even realize that it's a thing and that they haven't felt emotionally safe maybe ever. And when they start to see that as a thing and go, wow, if I'm emotionally safe, I can share what I need to share, and the person that I'm with can support me in a way that really helps me to own what I'm feeling and also grow from it. Like, their insights into what I'm experiencing can really help me accept what's going on so that I can release, as I loved what you said before about emotion, release it and actually move through the emotion to get into the next moment. Yeah. Because if we're not doing that, we're not getting into the next moment. And we stay stuck in those cycles again and again and again. So, yeah.
I love the creating the safe space around emotions. And the problem is we don't trust that people can actually hold us. Because when, there may be some times where, and this is where spongy boundaries come in. Sometimes people are really safe and they go, yes, I can hold this. And then there are other times where they go, this is just too much, go away. Or they're just not available. And they just dismiss what we've told them and saying, and this is my favorite, is the whole empathy. They empathize by fixing it.
Yeah. Because It's very hard not to say anything, right? It's very hard to watch someone that you love feel so much pain. Like, as a mother, like I could, and talking to other mothers, like, this is one thing that I know is something that is the biggest challenge in those types of relationships. It's like actually not saying anything. Just being supportive of the emotional space and not trying to fix, and I guess partnerships are the same. When we have people that we love, it's just like we just want to make it right for them, especially if we can. Like, the hardest thing is when I can help and I know that I shouldn't.
Yep. It is hard. Yeah. And that's when it's good to have people you can call up and go, oh, I just need to have a vent or a plum, a poor little old me, and just listen to me for a few minutes and just let me just share what's going on with you, what's going on. And then the ability to say, the other person saying, that sucks.
Yes, that's right. That's all you've got to say.
That sounds terrible. Gosh, I feel with you, but not, have you done this? And maybe you should do this. And maybe you should do that. I mean, there's a great game in that I learned when I studied nonviolent communication, which was called the non-empathy game. And we had to go from person to person to person and just say, I have a really bad headache. And then people would answer with things like, when's the last time you've had water? 20% of all people who have headaches on a regular basis actually have tumors. You should really go and see a doctor. Or just forget about the headache. Let's go and have a glass of wine or go shopping. You will always feel better when you do that. So all of these things, and it was really, so I did this exercise once as the subject, and we literally did this with 12 people. And by the time I came to the 12th person who said, gosh, that must be really painful. Is there anything I can do to support you? I was almost crying with relief that somebody was finally hearing me.
Yes, that's right. And that's the crux of it, right? It's, we don't hear people's emotions, and so we don't feel heard. So people go around all the time saying, nobody listens to me, nobody listens to me. And there might be other people there like listening all the time, but they're not listening to the emotion, which is what you just shared. That's like such a great example of that. And it's right. As soon as someone hears the way you feel, it's like, oh, I've been validated, which, by the way, we can do for ourselves. Oh, I've been validated. It's okay. I can relax for a minute. It's okay.
Yeah. And that's what we talked about, what we did on the weekend, this whole, it's okay to feel low. What are we going to do with it now?
Yeah.
But not immediately brushing it aside and going, I shouldn't feel this way. I mean, I always say we shouldn't should on ourselves.
Yeah, that's right. I like that. We shouldn't should on ourselves. That's good. Yeah. And it really is a skill, I think, to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, to be comfortable with that discomfort, and And really, like, because sometimes you can feel like you just, that feeling, I just want to get out of my skin. Like, you know, you've got so much emotion, you just want to get out of your skin, which is such a weird feeling, but that's what it feels like, right? It's just like, I want to get out of my skin. And it's like, oh, this is so uncomfortable, you know? And for me, it's like, okay, just got to be with it. What can I do to ease the pain? Validation, or have a sleep, you know, just go and have a little sleep. Sometimes clocking out for a little while is great, you know? So that's so interesting.
The problem that we have is we don't allow ourselves to feel those feelings. And then what we do is we inflict them on other people. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we have domestic violence for a lot of the time, because people just act out their emotions on other people. And it's not just domestic violence, it's violence in a lot of ways altogether. It's this whole, I don't want to feel my feelings, so I either have to act them out in ways that harms other people or that harm me. So medicating, drinking alcohol, gaming, sex. I mean, you can even use meditation to medicate emotions.
That's right.
There's not a single person on the planet who doesn't have a way of medicating emotions. Food. What else is there? Gambling, you know, you name it. Anything that takes you out of an emotion and that helps you medicate that so you don't have to feel it is an addiction. And we've all learned that. Right?
Yeah. It's very unproductive emotional technology, actually.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to learn, okay, I shouldn't be doing that, but it's a total other thing to go, well, what do I do instead of that? What do I do instead of that? How do I work through this? How do I use this to grow? How do I use this to take back power in areas of myself that I haven't? Because the other side of that story, when I can't trust someone, like you were talking about spongy boundaries and I can't trust them, actually, I can't trust myself. If I know how to trust myself, then I'm aware of who I can share my feelings with and who not to share my feelings with. And if there's somebody that can turn up one way one day and another the other day, then they would never create an emotionally safe space for me. So I would never share my feelings with them. So I think the other side of that story is, do we accept unacceptable behavior? And why are we doing that? Do we ignore red flags? And why are we doing that? Do we not say anything? Do we justify the behavior? And why are we doing that? Like, all of that is the emotional conversation with ourselves that for me was such a critical thing to start having.
Yeah. And it's also I totally resonate with you on that. And so once I know how I want to treat my own emotions and what boundaries I have in place, that what emotions are acceptable, or the emotional expression, it's not all emotions are acceptable, it's the expression of the emotion, what is acceptable in that context. When I can do that, then I can actually put guidelines in place for any kind of relationship. And when we have those guidelines, then it's much easier to deal with conflict, to deal with those low moments at work, both at work and at home. But we don't do that. We just assume that everybody should know how we feel and should be able to deal with that. And if they don't know how to deal with it, well, then maybe if I yell a little bit louder, or I cry a little bit harder, or I withdraw even more, maybe they will get what I'm talking about and they will realize how important it is to do that. But we don't. We don't.
Definitely needs an updated system, right? That's what I see as a solution. And what I think is really interesting is we see all of these other things as our problem. But actually, when you learn how to deal with your feelings about all of those other things, that's just the one thing you need to do, and everything outside of you rights itself.
Yeah.
So it's a much simpler way of approaching life, but it's very heart-based. And that is not how our culture has been designed. Our culture is designed to keep us in our heads, trying to fix things and, get busy, keep buying things, keep gambling, keep, like all of these things that we've been conditioned and programmed to do. So it's a very simple shift, but maybe not an easy one.
No, because we still have that differentiation between positive and negative emotions. I mean, but I have clients who tell me they don't want to be frustrated anymore. And I go, ever? And they go, yeah. And I say, why would you never want to be frustrated? Frustration is what pushes you forward, what gets you into a space of creativity. It motivates you to overcome problems. Imagine your life without frustration. You would take all sorts of crap. You would not be able to motivate yourself. You would just sit there and just be completely unmotivated. And people go, yeah, but it just feels uncomfortable. And I go, yeah, but that's the rub. It's the ability to be uncomfortable and then recognize what you can do to get yourself out of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very interesting because we're really calling ourselves and others to step into a completely different perspective on the way we do life.
Yeah.
You know, rather than seeing it as this in separation. I use the term separation. So we're looking at the duality, good and bad. We can step into a different perspective and actually accept the wholeness and then move with the wholeness to expand, to, you know, to use what's going on, to create more potential. And that really is very, like, it's a fundamental shift in the way we experience life.
Yeah. But and we teach children how to, well, we don't teach children, we teach them by example what not to do. So when a child cries really loudly, we tell it to shut up. When they play really loudly and they're really joyous, we tell them to shut up. So our emotional capacity for joy and for anger, frustration, sadness, whatever it might be, joy, peace. So this whole bandwidth gets narrower and narrower and narrower and narrower. And so then we reach our mid-40s, or maybe even earlier. Now people have a quarter-life crisis, not even a half-life crisis. Is that a half-life? No. Midlife crisis.
Midlife, sorry.
Half-life, that's a different thing. People get to this place where they don't feel alive anymore. And then when you ask them how they feel, they say, fine. And if there's one word I would love to cancel out of everybody's vocabulary, it's fine.
Yeah.
Fed up.
The acronym. Oh, sorry. What was your acronym? Fed up.
Oh, I've got it. It's like feelings inside not expressed, but also fucked up, irrational, neurotic, emotionally unavailable.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah, that's the one I use. Yeah, that's very good. It's true. I think there's more and more awareness over feelings. I really do. I think, especially in parenting, there's a lot more education on allowing the child to feel.
Yeah.
And I think that's great, supporting kids to feel everything they feel. The work comes when the parent can actually be so aware of their responses in the moment to the child's behavior and transmute that response. Because what I've noticed happens, and I used to do it, like, as a younger mum, it's like when my child did something that made me feel uncomfortable or not good enough as a mum, I would unconsciously withdraw the love. And I think that is what happens in the consciousness of relationships that really is outdated. When that person doesn't show up for me how I need them to so that I feel okay, then I withdraw the love. And then they learn that they have to be a certain way, people pleasing, you know, whatever they have to do, because they've taken on responsibility for my emotional well-being. They have to be a certain way so that I can love them again. So the love experience, and this, I think, has a lot to do with the boundaries and creating that emotional safe space in our relationships, because only then can the love be given. The love is never, ever questioned. It just exists. And then we can go and do all the other things. But at the moment, the love that we think we have becomes the bartering for my emotional well-being and me feeling okay. You know, it's like owning your stuff means that you can actually start to love. In a very pure way that doesn't exist a lot on this planet at the moment.
No. When you were telling the story, that this perspective of, you know, like parents being able to, you know, parents withdrawing the love, there's also the opposite. Again, we've got the flip side of this. So there's always too much emotion, not enough emotion, or withholding, or imposing your emotion on somebody. So I've also seen parents who when a child does something, it's all about them. So they get into a place of total drama and overstimulation. So, for example, I saw a child that had fallen over at one point. I was on a walk, and this mother and her child were walking, and the child just fell over, and it had hurt its forehead, and there was just a tiny little bit of blood. And mother reacted in a way as if the child had basically just, there was the child was bleeding out. It was crying. It was drama. We need to get a doctor. We need to get the child into an ambulance. We need to go to first to emergency. I mean, the mother went absolutely hysterical, and the child, who was quite calm initially. It was just it was no big deal really. Went right into the drama with mother. And imagine that you do this, like you withdraw the love, or you would do this kind of behavior over many years. These are the kind of patterns where children learn that emotions are something that have to be feared or struggled for. Right? I need to do something now to get the attention, to get the love. And that's not the education we need.
No, it's very true. It's not the education we need. And I think that it's calling all of us to own our behaviors, because some of them are very subtle. Some of them are not so subtle, and often we can't see them. And if we don't have a good relationship, an emotionally safe relationship with someone, then we really don't have somebody that loves us enough to say, you know what, that behavior really doesn't serve you anymore. And in cases like you just explained then, that to me indicates such a storage of emotion. Like, I've got so much emotion stored up in my body that I haven't expressed, that I only need a little touch and I explode, because I can't, like those kettles that are on the boil, and they keep spurting. It's like, you've got to have release. There's got to be a release of that emotion and that energy, because it just builds up so much, and the fear gets so incredibly just out of control. And really, we don't need to live like that, regardless of the impact on the children, on us. Life is not meant to be like that. That is highly stressful.
Yeah.
Really stressful.
The problem is that a lot of people thrive on drama. I have literally had people say to me when I said, you know what, I was really sad, and then I got myself out of that. I was really angry and I got myself out of that. And this person said to me, gosh, that sounds so boring. There's absolutely no drama in it. And I go, thankfully, I've had enough drama growing up. And I say this with all love and affection for my family. There was so much drama and no safe space. I didn't want to have that again, but I also didn't want to push the emotions down. I didn't want to get to this place where I was just fine.
Yeah.
And it took a while to learn how to do that, because
why? Okay. Tell me, Angela, why is it that you choose not to go into drama? What could possibly be more enjoyable and satisfying for you than going into that drama?
Getting out of it.
Yeah, but why? Why would getting out of the drama, like,
I know what it does for my health, for my well-being, for my inner peace. The benefits far outweigh the attention seeking or the attention grabbing, or whatever it might be. It's just, I can feel myself getting back into rest mode. I can feel my autonomic nervous system calming down. It has an impact on my relationship. If I have relationships where people, if I can say to you, Lisa, I just need to vent for 5 minutes and then I'm good, it doesn't interrupt our trust. What it does, you can rely on the fact that I can get myself back into a productive space. It will strengthen the trust that we have for each other, and you won't have the responsibility, right? Which means the next time I ask you, you don't go, oh, sorry, busy, I've got something else to do. You'll say, sure, I call that, I'll hold the bucket for you while you vomit for 5 minutes, no problem.
So I think that's really interesting, because that the education that would be amazing to have out there in the world. It's like the choices are that we continue being emotional babies and actually getting our sense of, I feel okay about myself at other people's expense, right?
Yeah.
Which is the drama, right? So I'm feeding a life with other people's energy. I'm not actually using my own creative potential, right? And the alternative, because what I've noticed is when I feel my feelings and I'm willing to go into them and actually use them to grow, I release an energy in my body that's like, and like sometimes I can feel like, oh my gosh, this is the most incredible experience. Like you can go, when you actually go into the feelings and you know how to transmute them, you can go from one experience of life, which is, it's okay, might be flatlining a bit, but then when you unlock that creative potential that's trapped as emotion, and you like, and it is a tangible feeling of, like
Being out.
bliss, right? It's great. It is a great feeling. And nothing can surpass that feeling. And that feeling state grows and grows and amplifies and amplifies. And being able to, the one thing that I notice, being able to walk into a room of crowded people and feel 110% comfortable in exactly who I am. I just walk in and I'm just there.
Mm-hmm.
That is, I look at that. I look at myself doing that quite often.
Mm-hmm.
Think, wow, this is like freaking cool. Because 20 years ago, I'd be, oh my God, I don't want to go to that. Oh my God. And you'd walk in and you'd be feeling insecure and you'd be feeling like a bit anxious and you wouldn't want to speak up. And it's like, that was like, I don't even remember that version of me.
And at the same time, it's also the ability to be vulnerable around saying, you know what, that's not really what I need right now. Maybe I don't want to be in a room with 100+ people.
Yeah.
I need to practice my self-care right now by being by myself, by having solitude, because I don't need to please anybody.
That's right. That was me on Saturday night, right? Invited to this party that was going to be so awesome. And I was so excited. And it's just like, I just couldn't go. And I'm like, oh, I just have to honor that.
Yeah.
So
that's an emotional boundary.
Yeah.
Wow. We can talk about this for hours.
Yes, absolutely. It's my jam and it's your jam. So we're jamming.
Yes. Gosh, this is such an important skill to have emotional boundaries. That's priceless.
Yeah, well, I think it's like it's understanding yourself, understanding the way it's really understanding the nature of the way that you are in relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
And the more you understand that, the more empowered you feel. And your boundaries become healthy boundaries. Or, like it's everything sort of clocks in the right way.
Yeah. And when it doesn't, you know what to do.
That's right.
Because it's never perfect. It's always progress, right? We're all works in progress.
That's right.
And when we've got
when you don't know what to do, it's like, yeah, well, that's just how it is right now.
Yeah.
Doesn't influence the way you feel about yourself.
No, exactly. Yeah. It's just an activity. It's not it's just a behavior. It's not who I am.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So we're both in agreement that self-awareness and really honest communication about what's going on is really important. And that, being really straightforward with yourself and with others, and being able to say, this is how I feel right now, but not acting it out. That's the difference that makes the difference, right?
Yeah, it is. And also being able to be discerning about the moment and who you're sharing that with. I think that's very important too, because some people are just not emotionally safe people to share how you feel. And sometimes some people you can't share how you feel. Like some partners are not open to it. Some people won't talk about talking about it. And so where do you go with that? Like that's really for you to be able to move through that moment and stop trying to make them hear you if they don't have the capacity to hear you.
Yeah. Well, that's why we've got great jobs.
Absolutely.
That go way beyond job.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's so beautiful when you see some, people that just, and you would have this experience too, when anybody that you're talking to has the experience of, oh, I get it. I get what to do with my feelings now. It's like they've just switched on a light.
Yeah.
And life becomes so much easier.
Absolutely. Well, that's a beautiful place to stop. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. And I'm sure that people who are watching and listening to this have had lots of BFOs, blinding flashes of the obvious, and hopefully lots of food for thought.
Blinding flashes of the obvious. I like that. Lots of food for thought. Exactly. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's like sometimes you just hear a couple of words and you just go, oh, wow, I haven't thought about it like that. Yeah. Thank you, Angela, for having me. This has been amazing. Very heart filling.
And thanks everybody for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time.